Hey, I'm Dammit, and this is my report on the phonemetric rite conducted on Saturday, February 27th, 2021. It was fantastic. I seem to have come back almost all the way from the grievous spiritual injury that I suffered last summer. This time I worked on 4 grams of cubensis and 1 gram of azuricens that a friend of mine gave me, backed with a 3.5 gram water extract of serine roux and 5 hits of pot, 3 of sativa, 1 of a hybrid, and 1 of indica over the course of 4 hours. I really think I'm starting to hit my stride in terms of what I would call skillful use. I shot video through the whole thing, and I narrated my experience on camera in between the songs that I was working on, and I stayed completely lucid all the way through, even when I was dropping into really deep visionary trances. And that's exciting to me. That's the goal. That is something that I think might be a little bit groundbreaking, is developing this method to be able to concentrate no matter how high the dose is and stay on point, stay on task. And what it allows you to do is report more accurately what it is that you are seeing and experiencing. A technique that I incorporated this time that I hadn't really concentrated on before was deep breathing. Especially during the early stages, during the invocation of the Divine Mother, that was really important to me in order to maintain a deep calm and happiness. I really just concentrated on, if I pulled the air deeply into my lungs, I could feel it sort of streaming past my sternum, and it feels good, it's pleasurable, and I just concentrated on that. And the other thing that I did was really focus on what I call looking, which is just with your eyes closed, you pick a point that's about here and you completely look at it, and you ignore what's coming up in your visionary space, which in the early stages can be really colorful and vivid, but oftentimes kind of nonsensical and even off-putting, and it can throw you off if you're trying to manage your anxiety, which is always a big part of it for me. I'll try to be relatively brief. There's a ton of material that came up, and that's one of the reasons why I've cut back to only doing this once a month. I've got a lot of stuff coming up that I have to now sort of digest and write about and integrate into my overall idea of what is happening to me through this work, and my sort of cognitive model that I'm using to interpret these experiences. Resistance was a heavy factor. And if you've watched any of these other videos, you know that resistance is a term that I borrowed from Stephen Pressfield that refers to a tendency in the universe to try to defeat the creation of new and original and beautiful things. It's the devil, effectively. And in the context of working with psychedelics for me, it shows up as a sudden spiraling fear, or a growing sense of uncertainty or futility about what I'm doing. And nowadays, since last summer, whenever those feelings show up, it's accompanied in visionary space by images of insects and mice and other kinds of vermin just sort of swarming over everything. There's a really strong sense that, especially last summer when I was first encountering this stuff, it suppresses the effects of the medicine. It makes it really difficult for me to get anywhere other than just sort of like staying locked into my own immediate awareness. There's no pushing off into any sort of higher levels of being. And that can be a dreadfully uncomfortable place to be when you're working with high doses of psychedelics. And the fear showed up relatively early, as soon as is used for glue, which is maybe 30 or 45 minutes into the night. There are a few key things that I want to bring up. One is that my the messianic messages that I get were back in full force growing even stronger. And what I noticed was that when I simply relaxed into them and accepted it rather than just rejecting it out of hand, if I was willing to sort of play along in this imaginal space with it, the visions intensified greatly, both in terms of their vividness and in terms of their kind of archetypal content. I won't bore you with the details too much. Let's just say that it's rather convincing. And I'm playing along with it. I've been reading a lot of books by imaginal psychologists like James Hillman and Thomas More and Dan Knoll. And I went into my work last night with a very serious intent. I was visiting the lands of the dead in order to find images to bring back treasures, right? And that's both that can be ideas or like I said, images, you know, like one thing that I saw last night that came up is, along with this messianic thing, was I saw these a coat of arms, and it was laid over densely interwoven branches, and I could see the branches so clearly. And then on the coat of arms was written the word Messiah in these glowing green letters. And then in between the branches and the spaces in between the interlacing, I could see glowing personages. I saw images of goddesses back there. And you know, you're in a very impressionable state, and you're just kind of left in awe of, like, what is this I'm seeing? Why am I seeing this? Because it hits you as hard and as meaningfully as the most profound dream would, except that you're consciously interacting with it, you know? There seemed to be, one thing I wanted to mention was that there seem to be stages or levels that you access as you go through this experience. And I know other people have models for this. Christopher Bash, who recently published a book called LSD and the Mind of the Universe, uses the Stan Grof model, where it's basically the stages of the psychedelic journey recapitulate the process of birth. Maybe. I don't see it that way, certainly. For me, it's much more of it seems to be moving through spheres of being. It has more to do with alchemical or Neoplatonist ideas, that kind of model of reality, of universal consciousness being gradated in levels, and what you see at each level changes. But what's fascinating about it is that it's consistent. From session to session, when you move into a certain level, you see certain kinds of things. And sometimes it's more abstract, and sometimes it's more vivid, and sometimes it's so incredibly vivid but so strange that it's difficult to describe what it was. As difficult as it would be if you took a caveman and plopped him in Times Square for 10 seconds and then brought him back to caveman times, and he tried to tell everybody else what he saw. He wouldn't be able to, you know? You can try to make analogies, but sometimes even that sort of fails. So what you're seeing is representative of the energies that you encounter. And this idea of seeing connects very strongly to what my friend Matt, who's an ayahuasquero, told me about what he does as part of his work. When he brings patients in front of him, he goes into a trance, and then he sees things in his head that allow him to diagnose what the problem is. And so I realize that I've reached that stage too. I'm not claiming to be doing any kind of healing work, but what I'm seeing in my head is an imaginal representation of the very, very real energies or entities, or however you want to describe them, that you can encounter. And a perfect example would be these images that arose later in the night that first started coming right around this time last year. I started having these really, really vivid visions of working class Massachusetts in the 70s and the 80s, which is a very sort of, could be very, very grim and sort of flinty and brutal, you know, very grubby, a lot of mud, a lot of like, you know, basically just like one step up from medieval villages. And last night at a certain point, I started seeing these guys in like tracksuit pants and gray sweatshirts with the arms cut off. And they're just bullies. And I realized that what they were there to do is enforce a certain kind of hierarchy, like they would in a neighborhood, like in those working class neighborhoods. If you get out of line, if people think you're putting on airs or think you're better than them, they'll put you in your place. You know, they'll make sure that you know that you're down in the hierarchy somewhere. And sometimes you've got to fight, you know. And that's what's going on with this, is realizing like, oh, this is representative of whatever it is that's trying to stop me from doing this. And they are trying to impose their will on me. They're trying to make me afraid, trying to make me stop. Like they did last summer. They totally succeeded. They ground me down and made the whole process, the whole experience so unpleasant that on 3 separate occasions I had to give up. And really, it sent me into like a spiraling depression. And so I respect them. I mean, I know enough. I know their power, but at the same time, I've grown so much that now I kind of see them for the real size that they are. They don't terrify me in the same way at all. And I guess what I want to say about it is they are there to impose their will on you, which means you have to step up and stop them. There's no such thing as nonviolent resistance or relaxing with this. If you simply try to relax, they will destroy you. And so you have to bring the fight to them, you know, sort of imaginally. And you do that by enjoying yourself, you know, and then you can use that energy to dispatch them however you want to. I learned from Matt what Matt does with the things that he sees in that space is he burns them. Like he imagines them glowing like white fire and then vaporizing, basically. He sends them back to their God. And that's good enough for me. And that actually ties into probably the most important discovery of the night, which was this. I was led to understand that these vermin that I was seeing are all conscious entities in their own right, but barely conscious. They just feel. And what they feel is fear. They're all in a constant state of terror. They don't know what's going on. They know that things are after them. It's deeply, deeply, wildly uncomfortable. And so they are constantly just on the run. And what is required to deal with them is to feel their fear, feel empathy for them. And out of that, feel pity and want to do something for them, want to help them. And that is the essence of the Divine Mother. And so the way to deal with these things when they show up is to love them. As crazy as that sounds, it totally works. You try to put yourself in their tiny little scrabbling shoes. You see things, and I saw, like, through one of their eyes, I saw what looked like a hospital corridor, and it was just scurrying into a corner and just like pressing its face into the corner, just desperate to try to escape. And I picked it up and I soothed it. And in doing so, I became an aspect of the Divine Mother. And the more that I did it and the more that I believed I was her, the more I was her in that moment. And there is something so deep in that it's going to take me a long time to really, like I said, to work it out. And all of a sudden the story changed. Like, these things had been showing up as a symbolic representation of this malevolent presence. But now I told myself a different story. I reframed it, and now they were running to me because they sense in me her. They've seen me as a spigot that can sort of like pour her energy out into the world, and they're running towards that source of comfort. And so that's what I have to do, is I have to find a way to, as much as I want to, as much as I care to take time to send them love. And if they're sufficiently wretched, set them on fire with love and send them back so that they can incarnate again and maybe come back a little bit better the next time. It's not entirely coherent. These things don't come in a neat package. You see this stuff in your head, and these ideas arise, and then you have to come back into the real world and try to assemble them into a coherent story. That's how these myths kind of evolve out of this stuff, this constant work. Which brings up this next idea of again, this is, I just typed up some notes based on all the notes. I transcribed 12 pages of notes from the video that I took, but I had this thing about Roy Neary in the obsessive elusive image. So if you've ever seen Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Roy Neary is the electrical lineman who sees a UFO and it implants an image in his head. And he spends part of the movie just desperately trying to figure out like what it is he's seeing. And he sculpts shaving cream, and he sculpts mashed potatoes. And eventually he builds this huge sculpture in the middle of his living room out of trash cans and dirt and chicken wire. And he cannot figure out what it is for the life of him until he tries to destroy it, and he tears the top off it. And then he sees on TV Devil's Tower in Wyoming, and he realizes that's what it is. He looks at his sculpture, and it's exactly what he's seeing on the TV. And so the idea that arose in the ceremony was that we all are ultimately destined for godhood, in a sense. We are all ideas in Ma's mind, these infinite variations of herself. And that image with unique characteristics, and that image of who we're going to become, that's the elusive image that's in our minds. And most of us are totally insensible to that, but for some of us, we've begun to grasp it, and now it becomes this desperate sort of search. But desperate's the wrong word. It's maybe desperate at first, but it should be joyful. This joyful exploration to try to plumb her mind, try to understand what she has, in mind, literally, for us. And then once you start getting a sense of it, working towards it with everything you've got. And so that's where I am with this now, right? I'm doing this work. I'm taking it seriously. I'm taking it literally, right? But I'm also working with it imaginally. Oops, that was unfortunate. I'm prepared to go all the way with this. If I get the resources that I need, it's all being mapped out, how I can bring this before the world, how I can get people to listen to me and take me seriously and understand that this is the real deal. This is coming down from on high, and it has the power to change the world, these ideas and these practices. But you still have to maintain a critical distance from it. You can't simply accept it uncritically, you know? And there's good reasons for that. I mean, one thing that came towards the end of the ceremony that was like a bomb going off in my face was this realization that I need to quit my job. And I don't want to quit my job, except that I hate my job. It's incredibly boring and incredibly stressful, but it pays well. And financial security is something I need, you know? And so the idea of like, you should quit your job and work on this full time is madness to me. That's utter, to simply accept that, to walk into the office tomorrow and give my notice would be insane and would probably lead to my self-destruction. So I have to sort of thread the needle on this, right? I have to believe, and I am believing, because I've just had too many incredible experiences to not believe in everything that's happened to me and the validity of this stuff, that it's not simply a psychosis, because I'm not psychotic. I just am being subjected to some unusual stresses, which I think on the whole I'm negotiating fairly gracefully. You know, I haven't given in to archetypal inflation. I still got my feet on the ground, even if I've got my head in the clouds. So I think for the time being, I'm going to do what is I will work this out in active imagination. I'll live this reality through my active fantasies. And then we'll see if the world catches up. I'm leaving room for that. There's a possibility. You know, in this day and age, I think physical miracles, if they ever occurred, aren't going to happen. If somebody could really walk on water or raise the dead, somebody in the world would be able to do something like that right now, in a lab, in front of cameras, which is part of the reason why I'm so adamant about wanting to, about videotaping this stuff and then posting footage of me going into trance states and being completely willing to go into a lab and do this stuff and show people, like have an EEG machine on me and like take my brain waves and watch these states that I'm able to get into. But one physical miracle that could occur is I could win the lottery. If I came into a very large sum of money that effectively gave me infinite resources to realize my plans, I can execute. I know I can. I am ready. I have matured into the role. It's a funny thing to realize, like you could hand me millions of dollars and I'm not going to run off to a beach somewhere and sip Mai Tais provided by beautiful young women, topless young women in saris. Saris? Whatever. What are the skirts called? Anyway, I'm going to do this thing. I will put myself out before the world. I will find people to help me frame this correctly, to get people to listen. I will buy my way onto the right panels so I can get people to talk to me and hear my ideas, hear me out. Let's leave room for that. Miracles can still happen. And that might be the only miracle that could actually convince people in this day and age. All right. Thus endeth my report. As ever, I am Pa Dammit, reminding you to say fuck yeah to every pain and every pleasure in life. Do it for your ma.
I'm an alligator. I'm a mama, papa coming for you.